San Francisco, it's Channel 5's People Are Talking with Ann Fraser and Ross McGowan.
And welcome to People Are Talking.
We have to thank all these people for braving the wind to come see us. If you've never been to Channel 5, we're overlooking San Francisco Harbor, so you can look out the windows of the studio here. And the Whitecaps, I mean, it looks like we're in the middle of the ocean.
Trees are bent down like that. I heard the water was coming over the highway.
Yeah, or in the Embarcadero. Who was kind of afraid last night? Who, during the middle of the night, did not sleep well? Oh, come on, the rest of you didn't bother you at all? I was a little nervous. We even slept toward the wall. So if the windows came in...
You were afraid they were going to break in?
Yeah, it was really scary.
My animals were like this.
Yeah.
2 dogs right here the whole time.
The old protector.
Oh, boy, I'll tell you.
You know, in the last 10 years, you and I have done a number of shows on animal rights. And they've always been controversial, and the controversy goes on regarding using animals for medical research. And I think in the news lately, we've been seeing an awful lot of stories on break-ins and bombings by people protesting using animals in the name of medical progress. We have both sides of the issue with us this morning. Would you please welcome them all?
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning and welcome to People Are Talking. Nice to have you here. Let's begin with Chris DeRose. Chris, you are the president and founder of Last Chance for Animals.
That's correct.
An organization. And you've just been released from the L.A. County Jail.
That's right.
You were serving 10 days. You served 10 days?
We did 10 days in there. We did 5 days right after we were arrested originally.
And what were you arrested for?
Trespassing, and it's a first conviction, and I was sentenced for 45 days, and Dr. Leslie Stewart was sentenced to 90 days. It was his second conviction, and right now he's still in there, and he's on a hunger strike and have him in solitary confinement. That's where I was, too. We were in the same section with Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and people like that.
For trespassing?
Trespassing.
So you
right.
you actually broke into the research lab at UCLA, is that correct, and trespassed?
We're going on trial for that in January.
So you haven't...
This is for the dean's office, when we went into the dean's office and stood in there and waited.
We have some video of that trespassing, and then we have the University of California, Los Angeles, the chancellor reacting to that. Watch this.
Come on! Next door. Come on, next door. Let's get in here, break. Get in there, get in there. Go. Behind me. Somebody open the door. Oh my God. Cameraman. Get these cats. Oh my God. Oh my God. Look at this cat wanting to get out.
I think what will happen is that some of it will be obstructed. I think the cost will increase. I think there will be increasing harassment of investigators who are really trying to find cures. But I think the resolve and the need of society for the research will certainly prevail in this case. If you look...
And I think we ought to tell you, and we didn't warn you, and we should have ahead of time, that some of the video that you're going to see this morning, like the video you just saw, is very, very disturbing. It was also disturbing. Who was it that was the battering ram for...
That's Dr. Leslie Stewart. He's the one that's in jail right now. And like I said, we haven't even gone up on these charges yet.
What was going on in this lab?
They were doing brain research, simulating mental retardation, epilepsy, things like that, Parkinson's.
On cats?
On cats, right, which has no relation at all to
So you are against all forms of animal research?
Yeah, I'd like to make it clear, though, the reason I am is not because I've never had a pet, so it's not a pet or a cat and dog issue for me. I just feel it's a big scientific scam. It's just a lie.
So you think it's needless research? Yeah, this is Larry Katz, and you are a research physiologist.
That's correct. Good morning. I'd like to comment on what we just saw because I realize that most of you haven't seen similar film such as this before. And those cats, what you saw on the top of the head was primarily dental cement. That's what was that pink material. That wasn't part of the cat's skull. That was some cement that was placed there to hold the electrodes in place. I should also add that the brain has no pain sensory nerves. So these pains were not in discomfort. These cats were not in pain.
At all.
Yeah,
At all. And the
research
research dealt with epilepsy, which is...
It's not a matter of whether the animal's in pain. I think that's irrelevant to the issue because we're all in pain at certain times of our life, and that's
agree,
not
but
a
the point
central
was
issue.
being made.
The
They were saying,
central
what have they
issue
done to these poor cats? And the
is
cats were
whether
not
the animals are
suffering.
being treated humanely. If you took human beings and you did things that were non-painful, yet you incarcerated them and then eventually killed them, as these cats will be killed, you would not consider that humane. Yet if we do the same thing to non-human animals, we say it's humane.
Now,
Why is it humane?
Hold on just a minute, Carl. This is Ned Bukmacha, and you were in animal research yourself for some 12 years.
I am an animal researcher now, but for 11 years of my life, I killed animals in research, and I was an NIH grantee, a principal investigator through the National Institutes of Health. And I no longer agree with experimental work which results in the harm or death of these animals, primarily for moral reasons, for ethical reasons. I would challenge anybody to give me morally relevant differences between human beings and other animals. There are none.
So are you saying if we're going to do research for the betterment of human beings, we should be doing that research on humans?
And in fact, we do, and we can. Many of the very
limited in what we can do on human
But that's not true. Many of the major advances in biomedical medicine, for instance, nutrition, understanding how our body responds to various vitamins, for instance, where those types of research were done on human beings, not on non-human animals. It would be irrelevant to do the needs, the daily needs, for instance, for vitamin C on cats or guinea pigs, because that is not going to be extrapolatable to the human being.
But what about vaccines?
Vaccines, that's a good point. Yellow fever, there's no animal model, if you will, of yellow fever, yet we have a vaccine for yellow fever. Do you know how that was developed? Through the use of humans, human volunteers.
And how about polio?
It could be the same thing with polio. The point is that we don't even try. My colleagues in the biomedical community are intransigent. They don't want to try to look for alternatives.
No, that's not true. We're developing alternatives all the time. Alternatives are used wherever they can replace animals.
That's simply not true.
It certainly is true. We use alternatives in my laboratory whenever we can, and other labs are doing so. There are just some questions that can't be answered with an alternative.
Who are you?
I'm Carl Nickel. I'm a professor of physiology at UC Berkeley, and I'd like to take issue with what Dr. Bukimiki's been saying, and also DeRose.
What's your point?
Well, my point is that the animal researchers do use alternatives to a very large extent. In fact, 84% of the biomedical researchers at UC Berkeley are using alternatives almost exclusively.
Such as computers?
Computers, tissue cultures, immunoassays, all kinds.
Then why are you still using hundreds of thousands
because
of
of a
animals
lot of
a year?
things you can't do on computers or in test tubes. You can't cure cancer
You don't
on
have
a
to
computer.
tell me that. That's insulting. I'm a researcher. I understand that.
I'm a physician who's been involved in, I did full-time clinical research involving animals for 1 year, and I'm now presently involved in AIDS research involving human subjects because we have no animal models for AIDS.
That's not true.
Well, you know what? Let's continue this discussion about AIDS research right after this, but as we go to a commercial break, this bumper that you are about to see is graphic. So if it's something that bothers you or small children, we suggest you don't look at it. We'll be right back after these messages.
This is electrocautery, a painful procedure for an unanesthetized animal. The experimenter acknowledges that the animal is lifting his head and needs nitrous, yet he continues to cut into the monkey's head while the animal responds to pain, a violation of the NIH guide in such procedures. The researcher then cuts in the wrong place. A About to be injured, this baboon is strapped down to the operating table. His ankles and wrists are bound with canvas straps. His head is cemented into a metal helmet and will be thrust at a 60-degree angle at a force of up to 1,000 Gs. A force of only 15 Gs can kill a human being.
Yeah. Ready? Yeah. 1, 2, 3. 2, 1.
Raymond, how do you react to that video we just saw with the cats?
I'm horrified, even though it's not the first time that I've seen this video.
We're horrified up here, too. In fact, the scientific community condemned that research, and the NIH funding was removed.
I'm frightfully sorry. May I hardly got to begin what I was going to say. I'm frightfully sorry, however, to contradict this gentleman by saying that the scientific community did not condemn this research. It was only when it was revealed and protested against so massively by people who were concerned about it that the government intervened. Meanwhile, the president of the institution at which this research was taking place had defended it, said it was absolutely necessary for scientific progress, and was only brought to cut it down by government order, because, of course, there are government taxpayers' funds that are paying for this. And this, if I may say so, is, I think, the bottom line of all of this. What is wrong here is that universities and all sorts of medical research, biomedical research institutions have become so dependent upon the many thousands of millions of dollars that they get from the taxpayers in the form of grants, as, for example, from the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, that they feel they're very...
they cannot do without it.
That's it. The financial well-being of their institutions is in jeopardy without that money.
Yes. The NIH in that study, and the University of Pennsylvania head injury study, it took 1.5 years to stop that study. In fact, the NIH was going to give $500,000 more for the University of Pennsylvania head injury study. The other thing is it violated 74 parts of the Animal Welfare Act, which is a federal law, and there's been a tremendous resistance on the part of the research lobby to prevent this law, which is a federal law on the books, and the Dole-Brown Amendment to the Animal Welfare Act is on the books since 1985, and it's still not been put into play because the research lobby has resisted the institution of this act. And this act
let's talk to a man who actually did this research.
Similar to the cat research, I actually worked at the University of California Medical School for 8 years, and the first 2 years I was there, I developed an electronic stimulator to stimulate cats, and I implanted them and put the dental acrylic, very similar, and we were actually putting something in the...
Was it painful to the cats?
It's very painful at first, and at that time there was very little use of pain medication. It's changed a little bit since then, but there's always swelling around here. The cats rub, they develop infections here. It's very painful. And all the time the surgeries are not done so well. Many times infections develop, and many times this is a chronic problem. And I sort of disagree with Dr. Bukmicha as far as the problem I see in research. I don't oppose what's called acute research. That is research where the animal comes out of the cage, one experiment is done, and then they are put to sleep. They never wake up. They actually don't suffer anything.
So they're killed?
They're killed right away. And until we cure problems in the city pounds and stuff, it's a little hypocritical to oppose that too strongly. But the stuff that I'm militantly against is chronic research like I did, where every other day we were stimulating the cat, and the cat would be a terrible situation. It's worse than your worst nightmare. The research range...
So you're talking about the redundancy of research?
Not just the redundancy, also the chronic painful research where the cat has to undergo many
and I think that's a concern of a lot of people. Dave.
Ross?
Go ahead, Dave.
All right. What I think we're doing is getting off topic here. We're talking about the laws involved, and it seems to me to be more of a law enforcement problem. I mean, you don't shut down a hospital just because, there's a malpractice suit, and that's what seems to be happening here. You have one case, it's been very graphic, it's been overemphasized on the TV.
So you're for animal research?
I'm for animal research from some chronic illnesses that have happened to members of my family.
Such as?
Diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, high blood pressure, and what I'd like to see, as opposed to...
And you're saying without animal research, like insulin, would not have been discovered?
Well, I think that's a given, but I think that's something that the guests here could talk about instead of one issue that seems to be an abuse, and then it allowed to characterize the entire field.
Well, Michael,
I think they could discuss the validity of scientific research.
Hang on, let Michael
I'd like to just jump in here for a second because we heard a lot about people claiming to be researchers and done research, but this issue, it's much bigger than that, and it gets down to a fundamental thing where we just leaped away from. I agree, certainly you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater because of one incident. It's now been decried. I think researchers are alerted to that going on, and as the tape said at the outset, it was a violation of the guidelines, what we were seeing there. And we shouldn't condone that, just as we shouldn't condone or even say, I understand why terrorist raids occur.
But how do you police that?
But wait, let me say one thing, though, about this. The big thing is that it's not a separate world. We don't do research just on animals for the benefit of humans, and we don't do just animal models versus alternatives. Even a layperson can understand that you pursue various avenues, and it includes using petri dishes, it includes using computer models to guess where you should pursue with your research. It includes using animal models to get into a live system, and even when we get up to people, there's some systems where it's better to do clinical research. There's no point in doing a system where you don't have an animal model on animals, or it's no point in doing it where it fits better in a clinical trial. Not everything is susceptible to that. And wait a second, let me just finish. You guys have had a little while, if I can. I know I tend to be long-winded, that's because I'm not a researcher. But the point is this, is that in clinical trials, people volunteer. There's a shortage you see in the newspaper saying, we need healthy people to come in and try drugs so we can see what the impact of the drug is going to be.
All right, here, let's get Donna's comment.
Ross,
hold on just a minute so she can react to what you just said.
No, I'm just finishing up the other side.
Go ahead, Donna.
Okay, hi. I'm representing the disabled and incurably ill for Alternatives to Animal Research, and it's a growing number of people who are horrified and deeply distressed by research happening in these animal labs. We've been promised cures for years. They have not resulted. Many of us are ill because of animal research. We have a person who has lost her speech. We have someone who has lost their hearing. I myself have kidney damage done from a drug that was supposedly safe for the use of animals, mild side effects.
So in your opinion, much of the animal research has been useless as far as you're concerned, and many of you.
Much of that research is imperfect.
All right, hold on, Donna.
I'm Jim Thomas at Stanford. I'm a medical student there. Donna, I'm sorry that if what happened to you actually is a result of a drug, some of that testing is imperfect. My father also spent the last 14 years of his life in a wheelchair because microsurgical techniques for spinal cord operations had not been perfected, and the surgery that he had to undergo left him paralyzed. But he lived. He wouldn't have lived 5 years before then.
There's an assumption, and the assumption is that these are isolated instances where the Animal Welfare Act is being violated. The USDA, which is a government organization, it's not research, it's not university, a government organization looked at 186 laboratories in America. Out of those laboratories, 25% met minimum guidelines based on federal law. It's also an assumption that the University of Pennsylvania study is an isolated study. It is in fact not an isolated study. The University of Cincinnati has killed 1,000 cats over a 14-year period doing a head injury study which 20 scientists all universally said had no validity whatsoever.
Dr. Nager, you talk about guidelines. What are the guidelines?
That's a good question. The guidelines are very long, but in essence the guidelines talk about the conditions of animals in laboratories, cage size, exercise regimen. Primates have to have continuity with other primates because they go insane if they're kept in cages. There's been a concerted effort by the part of the research lobby to thwart the initiation of these Animal Welfare Act and the Dole-Brown Amendment because it costs money.
What about anesthetics?
Good question.
There's no requirement for
that.
But the
study, let me just finish the question.
Why don't we take a commercial break and pursue the anesthetics when we return? Be back in just a moment.
I lost a daughter to polio who contracted it before a vaccine was available. But that vaccine, which could not have been developed without animals, has ensured that my grandchildren and everyone else's have been free from that same threat.
My son's condition has taught my wife and I an awful lot about the value of life. I've also learned about biomedical research, including research involving animals, which is helping us to find cures for today's major medical problems. You and I might not be alive today if dedicated health scientists hadn't discovered vaccines, antibiotics, anesthetics, and insulin through careful study and testing on animals. But this issue has been distorted by badly misinformed individuals and groups who are trying to put a stop to or seriously limit the use of animals in research.
You say animals, it's not required to give them an anesthetic.
The point that I was trying to make, it's hard to say that just a moment before we go into a break, but the law does not require, well, the law has exceptions. You can do anything you want to a non-human animal in the name of science. The law specifically allows you as the researcher to make that exception. There's no definite requirement. It's not like saying you have to use anesthesia all the time. If your project requires that you do not use anesthesia because it would interfere with the results, then you don't have to use it, assuming that you can get funded, assuming that a peer group would approve of it. The baboon study at the University of Pennsylvania is a primary example of this situation. That lab was funded for 12 years by the NIH at a tune of $1 million a year, and the protocol, which I read page after page, did not provide for adequate anesthesia of these animals and was approved by a group of peers.
And the other thing, that post-operative pain, these animals from the University of Cincinnati were traumatized using a .22 caliber bullet that penetrated, that produced a blast that made a metal template penetrate the skull and cause a skull fracture. The animals were left for 2 days without food and water. No attempt was made to give them any analgesics, and by law, you do not have to give animals analgesics during a research project.
By law,
Hey, hang on just a minute, Jim, because we've got a caller on the air that can't wait to say something. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, I wanted to say that we had a son that just died in February of this year at age 7 of a genetic disease called Niemann-Pick, and it's related to Tay-Sachs. And we're active members of the National Tay-Sachs and Allied Diseases Organization, which strongly supports animal research. This disease is just an ugly way, and it's a horrible way to die. It's a prolonged death. That, you know, we knew about our son at age 2.5, and it went on for 5 years where he lost every function that he had. And we know hundreds of people, you know, in this organization, parents that have children in the same situation. And the organization just strongly supports animal research to find a cure or some kind of treatment that, you know, would help people with this disease.
Thank you, caller. Thank you for sharing that this morning. Jim, now how do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I'm bothered by the fact that we keep dredging up Penn. That research has been, that monkey head trauma research has been eliminated. It's been stopped funding. But the second issue, dealing with anesthetics, is a question that Dr. Bucamici is right in that there is a proviso for not allowing anesthetics, but it has to be scientifically justified. So every time, wait a second. So every time a researcher submits a proposal, the burden of proof, he has to prove to any committee at various levels that he has to eliminate anesthetic. And in practice at Stanford, where I can speak with some authority, that there is no research project, to my knowledge now, where any pain greater than an injection or withdrawing blood, an animal does not receive anesthetic.
So we know where you three stand on animal research because you're involved in it. Chris, you are against all forms of animal research. Bob and Ned, are you against all forms of animal research?
No, I believe a certain amount of animal research has to continue. I'm involved, being an ophthalmologist, we do surgery, and a certain amount of animal surgery is required, but we're now switching over to using cadaver eyes. It seems very bizarre, but you're faced with a laser and an eyeball that's suspended in a solution in front of the laser. And I think that we're switching over from animal models to human cadaver material. But I personally am not against the use of animals. I am against restriction. I'm against the useless research. It is not isolated. And I think to say, for example, that Stanford looks at various things, Stanford went on record in a letter when the AWA law came into effect. They objected in a FASAB. They supported FASAB, which is a Federation of American Scientists. They supported an objection that Stanford had to euthanize animals in the method. Euthanize means kill animals after research is complete. They objected to the euthanizing animals in the mandates of this law because they felt it would be a restriction on their research. So even killing animals, Stanford felt that was intrusive on the research. I'm against the attitude by the research community to limit.
Well, I'm against the use of non-human animals or humans in research that involves harm or death where the individual does not consent to it. We would not think it morally appropriate if we took humans against their will.
So, I mean, obviously animals cannot consent to this kind of research, so you're against all form of animal research.
What the woman was talking about, Niemann-Pick disease, that's a tragedy, but it's no less a tragedy, or no more a tragedy, than taking a monkey and putting her or him into a cage, isolating them from their conspecifics for years, and then killing them. Why is that any more of a tragedy for that
Doctor,
individual?
hang on. Just before we go to commercial break, Lisa, you had a comment.
Yes, I wanted to say that I think most people are unaware of the fact that research institutions are specifically exempt from anti-cruelty laws. Section 599 of the California Penal Code, and there's a penal code like that for every state in the union just about, specifically exempts research institutions and almost spells out that you can do whatever you please to an animal provided it's part of a
That's
of a
because the
subject.
state
Could I
enforcement
also
authorities
please contradict
know
Mr.
that
Thomas,
they don't
who
have the
said
knowledge or the
that
authority to regulate
no painful
research.
experiments are conducted at Stanford. I've been at Stanford for 30 years, and there's a tremendous amount of research conducted at Stanford, and has been, that is specifically intended to produce pain. All stress research that involves electroshocking and so forth. Addiction research, where animals with no possible extrapolation to human beings often are subjected to the, torments, the tortures of withdrawal.
And so we've got, all right, Jim, we'll give you a chance to respond. We'll be right back. Jim, you wanted to respond.
I had a response. First of all, I want to say that Mrs. DeRose charges that there's research at Stanford specifically designed to be painful are untrue. I want to make a second point about the fact that regulation doesn't exist to cover the use of animals in research. Now, there's something called the NIH guidelines, which are guidelines that are very specific about how animals will be treated when they're used in surgery, how they'll be treated when they're in the post-operative stage. If they'll get pain relief, they must get pain relief. And those regulations, those guidelines have the force of law. No, they have absolutely the force of law. If you violate those guidelines, your money is stripped.
I ask you to read page 37 of the guidelines, last revised in 1985. You will see that what he has said is absolutely untrue. You do not have to have analgesics after surgery if your project does not require, or if it will interfere with the result.
That you can't
the point is that you don't use analgesics routinely. For instance, if you're doing cancer research, how many of you have cancer or have had family who've had cancer? You know that it's a painful condition. My father just died of cancer. It's horribly painful. But if you're studying cancer and you're inducing cancer in other animals, if you give them analgesics, you may interfere with the immune response, therefore interfere with the development of the cancer. Therefore, you don't use analgesics in cancer research animals.
Is this really...
So they suffer just the same. So it's
like
nonsense that the guy
Chris
does anything.
is completely against animal research.
Don't use them.
Is this a black and white issue? Can you be, I mean, how can you say yes
Hang on,
or
Sandra's over here because she wants to answer.
Hold on just a minute here. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, there are some issues that are really black and white. For example, child abuse. Would some of you be moderate
okay. No, wait, hold on just a minute. Let's stick with animal abuse here now. You are against all forms, no matter what it might produce, of animal research.
Yes, I am. I just don't think we have the right to use other species this way. This man expects to be, he thinks it's okay to research on animals because his relatives had diabetes and high blood pressure. Well, the fact is, most of these illnesses are actually caused by human error or bad diet. And why should other species?
Well, Sandra, let's let Sandra respond.
Most human illnesses are not caused by our own fault, bad diet, and all those kinds of things. There is not a single person in this audience who would be alive today were there not for animal research. It's absolutely crucial for nutrition, vaccines, everything you can think of. Let me finish. But I want to say that there's been an enormous focus and misrepresentation about the pain that animals experience in research in this program. And in fact, the best statistics that we have from the government on this issue suggest that there are only 6% of the animals used in research which experience any pain and discomfort. And I think that it is very important to focus on the pain and suffering that human beings have from the kinds of illnesses and diseases they suffer from. I mean, this is an issue that you have to come to grips with.
Like our caller.
That's not even the issue, though. That's not the issue.
Sharon, you have a comment.
Because humans are suffering, why is it okay to make
let's get more of the audience here. You're doing a good job, but let's get more of the audience here.
Well, I couldn't agree with Sandra more. The problem is that we're talking about human beings who are suffering from diseases such as this woman who called about her baby, people who have babies born who need heart transplants. things like this. We're talking about humans. I'm sorry, if animals have to suffer, I'm an animal lover. I have a cat. I love my cat. I have it vaccinated. It's not going to die of leukemia like my last cat.
I'm not an animal lover, and the reason I do it is because I've spent 9 years reading doctors' periodicals and journals, and I've got to say that the biomedical research community is it's common sense. You can get into all the technicalities of the laws and this and that. It's common sense. You listen to them. For years, they've been promising you cures. There are no cures via animal research. It doesn't work. They lie to you. They're constantly deceiving you about it.
I'm living proof. I would not be standing up as I just did were it not for hip implants that I had. And those were developed through dog models. They are now being used in veterinary offices to help dogs. So their animal research helps humans and animals.
Human health? What makes you think we're against human health?
We've got to take another commercial break. Dr. Katz here is jumping out of his skin. He's got to say something. They've all got it. We'll be right back with more of this discussion.
Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, my name is Rachel, and I have brain cancer, and I'm not in support of animal experimentation at all.
If through animal research they could find a cure for your brain cancer, you still would be opposed to it?
I think people probably do benefit from experimentation on animals, but I don't think that's the issue. I think that animals don't have a voice. Animals are experimented with, and they don't have a voice.
Thank you, caller.
Dr. Katz.
Yes, I'm tired of hearing well-dressed-up animal researchers who, I'm a veterinarian. I've been in this field now, involved trying to stop animal abuse and cruelty in research laboratories for 5 years. We have an animal abuse hotline. There is tremendous intimidation on people within the system who try to speak out. Right here in the Bay Area, there are ludicrous color vision studies going on where they drill holes into the brains of monkeys, ridiculous sex studies in hyenas. Billions of dollars are being wasted right here in the Bay Area that could better be spent to give people proper treatment.
Anna Marie.
These aren't just pets. These are animals that are being bred for scientific.
Yeah, where are you getting these?
They don't feel anything, right?
But still, they're not pets.
The majority of animals is true. The majority of animals are not taken, and in San Francisco County, you can't take animals out of the pound or San Mateo
Most animals
County.
are rats and mice. 90% or better of the research animals
feel
are
any
rats and
less
mice.
pain?
But Anna Marie's question is, they're bred for research. Is that the case?
It's relevant because they're bred for that purpose.
I think
Can I say something from the public person's point of view? And the key point of this, everybody can cite one instance on one side or the other, and we have lots of cures. But the fact is, the less we know, the more expensive the treatment. And we can see no better example than right here in San Francisco with AIDS. The threat that it posed, palliative treatment, i.e. just nursing somebody through, is the most expensive way you can handle anything until you have vaccines. And the more you understand about a system, the better off you are, the more we can afford health care. And we're not just talking about an instantaneous or some kind of transplant situation. We're talking about delivery of health care to poor people, to everybody. Unless we get it under cost control, we can't do it.
Sarah,
We're also talking say something in response to that. These are the same kind of people that are telling you that they're cutting back on the use of animals, like the man on the end said, oh, the Generelli Laboratory incident, University of Pennsylvania, isolated case, you know. All these are isolated cases. Anytime the ALF had gone in there and done a raid, they consider this an isolated case, not isolated cases. And the California biomedical research community says they're using less and less animals. From 1973 to 1985, at UCLA alone, they were using in 1973 3,100 animals a year. Now they're using over 100,000 animals a year. That's a decrease in the number of animals? That's a lie. They're constantly, point is, they're constantly lying to you. And the public, don't listen to me or any of these guys on our side here.
And you're saying this is totally wrong. Well, here, I'll hold the mic. You talk.
I was on the commission that drew up the draft on animal use in this state, and your statistics are totally wrong.
I've got the statistics.
You've got the statistics?
Yeah, that's right.
The one thing
what you're hearing here is a whole series of distortions of the facts, because these people are so concerned about animal suffering. I'd like to hear more concern about human suffering, because that's what we're concerned about primarily.
Hang on. All right. Hang on. Just a minute, Carl. Sarah.
I would like to say that I agreed with this caller tremendously. This is a moral and an ethical issue. You do not continue to maintain an institution that is immoral because of something that you may possibly be getting from it. We do not maintain a system of slavery in this country, even though this country is founded on the sweat of slaves.
Yes, it is a moral and an ethical issue, and this country has decided that human suffering is important.
Dr. Katz, I'd like to ask you, if you were not doing this kind of research, what would you be doing, and how would you be earning your livelihood? And if there was no funding to fund your project, what would you be doing to exist today?
Well, if there were no funding, I would be an electrician, because I have those skills. But the fact is, I find that there are important questions that need to be asked out there. This isn't the format to discuss them. Right now, I'm looking at how the liver functions as an endocrine organ in growth and development, and it would be impossible to do that in a non-animal system.
Money is being wasted that could help some other people.
No,
and we'll take a
that isn't how
commercial
the
break,
system
and
works.
we'll be
You know
back.
very
Bob,
well.
I know you have a comment you want to make. We shall return in a moment.
Barbara.
My girlfriend just brought her 5-month-old baby home for the very first time with a new heart, thanks to animal research.
I'd like to comment about heart. Everyone talks about heart, and in fact, what has happened in heart surgery is they did an enormous number of monkey studies. I mean, Shumway at Stanford was one of the pioneers in heart surgery, and it's been said by many cardiovascular surgeons nationwide that a great number of less animals had to be done because, in fact, cardiovascular surgery was learned on human models, doing it on human beings. Eye surgery is learned on human beings. When I do an operation on a cat's eye, there's so many different species differences in a cat that if you don't operate on a human eye, you're not operating
They would have never started
really
it if it wasn't for animals.
What he said.
Nancy.
And he said Shumway.
We are talking about
feelings.
We are talking.
All right, Nancy.
I've been an animal rights activist, and now I have arthritis. And I still feel the same way, absolutely no animal research, and I also feel that animal research is impeding the real cures here. And my mother had MS for all of her life. And they told us 30 years ago, great things in the labs. Cures are right around the corner.
And nothing has come about. All right.
Millie.
I had a grandson that died of sudden death and infant death syndrome, and I feel that maybe he would have been saved if they had some research in there. And I believe in animal research, but humanely. I don't believe.
So do we. Animal research does not equal to suffering or cruelty. We care about the animals.
This lady says she's an animal rights activist, and she said there were new developments for MS. If you watched the CBS Evening News last night, they are really looking at a real cure for autoimmune diseases on arthritis, diabetes, and MS. And those animal rights activists have to ask themselves, do they eat meat? Are they going to watch 5 billion chickens slaughtered? Are you wearing leather shoes there?
Talking about the...
And one more. If you're eating even grains, you're depriving rats and all sorts of wildlife the right to eat.
Just this morning on the news, when I was at the hotel, I was listening that they had rats that were bred just for cancer research. And the guy at the end, when he was narrating it, said, if they only realize that it doesn't work, that from the rats to human beings, it's a different cancer, it's a different way to approach the disease. And I'd like to make one other comment about something that was said here, and I really take offense to it. And that's people that are going inside these facilities, they're called terrorists, like the Animal Liberation Front, what we did. We're terrorists. What are they doing inside these facilities? That's not terrorism. That's terrorism.
We are working within the system and within law.
We have the system because you own the system. You put the politicians in. You got the largest lobbyists. You're owned by the damn oil companies.
Research a contradiction in terms. Even though he said he was in the gray area of this, he said humane research is a contradiction in terms and it can't be done. We think that animal research is necessary and it is to be done in the most humane fashion possible. And that's we can't convince you. If you believe that animal research is morally wrong, you can't be convinced. But that's not the point. We're talking about delivery of health care not only to people, but to veterinaries, to animals. And that's the point.
You know what? These researchers do not believe in humane research because they oppose every little bit of legislation. I believe in humane research. I've told you that I'm not opposed to acute research, but Sandra Bresler's organization, who's a paid attorney,
depends on the
has a vested
legislation
interest.
and whether it
You
really
oppose the
achieves the
Torricelli
purpose
bill,
it's
which
designed
is for...
or raises
No,
the
you're
expense.
interrupting. Let me, please.
We have 30
You've
seconds
opposed
left.
almost all the legislation vigorously.
All right. Okay, Sharon, real quick.
Jack Anderson in a column recently said one of the two greatest ways to get rich quick is be a TV evangelist or an animal rights activist.
Well,
So
research-
good
You know how much money it's cost me in the last 9 years? I gave up a very good, productive career as an actor to do this. You people are paid to be here. You people do these things and you get paid for it. You know what you got to lose? A lot of money, federal grants. You know what I lose? I lose $200,000 a year to be here. To be here to fight your big business about research.
Well, obviously, it is a complicated and it is a controversial issue which we will not solve this morning, but we bring the issues for you to make the decision yourself. Thank you, all of you, for being with us this morning. Ann and I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Last season, we introduced you to Chris DeRose. Chris did a few stories for us. He did stories on some dogs held captive in a legal fight, a special family of handicapped kids, and a woman who's saving Romanian orphans. Well, we got lots of letters about Chris, bags full, in fact, but they were not fan letters. People were telling us to get Chris off the air. A lot of them used the exact same words. Now, it couldn't have had anything to do with the stories on our show. No, it has to do with Chris's work in the animal rights movement. It's time to clear the air, so we decided to have Chris square off against the people behind the letter-writing campaign, a group called Putting People First, in a debate. Now, before we start, I've got to ask one thing of spokeswoman Kathleen Marquardt. Who the heck is Putting People First, and who's writing all these letters?
Well, Putting People First is a grassroots citizens organization that believe people have the right to choose whether to drink milk, eat meat, wear leather, wool, fur, silk, hunt or fish, own pets, or benefit from biomedical research.
Well, we have in a separate studio Chris DeRose. And Chris, let me ask you, what do you find wrong with the folks from Putting People First?
Well, first place, the way they attacked me, saying that I'm feeding hate-filled propaganda in the minds of the children in this country, I think is a personal attack on me, seeing how I have worked with children in the past. I worked with orphans. That was the first thing I did, seeing how I was in an orphanage myself. I worked with juveniles. I've been a big brother to 24 different boys. I take personal offense to that. It's something that really, these people are saying these things without any grounds, without any foundation.
Kathleen, what exactly did you say about Chris DeRose? Did you call him a terrorist? All right, I understand there are bumper stickers out that say, "Save a frog, dissect an activist." Are those bumper stickers that are connected with you all?
There are bumper stickers. They are obviously in jest. They aren't something that we would ever say in a speech or anything. They are to help raise money to combat the animal rights movement.
Now, what exactly do you say about Chris DeRose? I understand he's been called a terrorist. Is that correct?
Well, he is in favor, things that we have read, he's in favor of breaking the law. He says he's been to jail for animal rights, and if this is so, then he believes in terrorism. He believes in arson.
Is that true, Chris?
Terrorism and arson? No, I don't believe in terrorism. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that we're trying to do, and that's counteract terrorism by stopping these horrors and the terror that is going on inside research facilities. And once the public becomes aware of what's going on inside there, they will want to see it cease.
How far do you go, Chris? Is any animal experimentation justified?
No, I don't feel any animal experimentation is justified because it is detrimental to human health.
None at all?
None at all, no, sir.
Kathleen?
He also says even if it weren't a fraud, because he calls medical research a fraud, even if it weren't, he would still fight as vehemently against it. Well, how can anybody respond to somebody who says, I'd fight against it even if it were great? I mean, that's absurd.
Chris
first of all, it's not just me. There are doctors. We have there's a book out called Over 1,000 Doctors Against Vivisection. And this book here is by doctors, and I've read their medical reports, and this is how I am able to substantiate that animal experimentation is a fraud. It's detrimental to human health. It's hurting the taxpayers. We are paying billions and billions of dollars every year for animal experimentation that is killing people. I'd like to see people get help, medical help, not through animal experimentation, but medical help that cannot afford to have hospitalization. I'm familiar with a case right now in Kentucky of a family that cannot afford medical attention, and yet we'll spend billions of dollars on animal experimentation. And I think more and more people now are getting hip to the fact that it is a scam and it is a fraud, because where are the cures? I ask you, Kathleen, where are the cures to all these diseases?
Virtually every medical advancement in the 20th century has come about through research using animals.
That's not true.
The cures are there.
Give us a specific, Kathleen.
Polio. Specific, polio.
Chris, is that true?
No, that's not true, because there's a graph that's been done on the polio inoculation, and if you look at it, it shows that in the United States alone, in areas like in the Rocky Mountain areas, Appalachia, where the polio inoculation, they weren't able to get it up into those mountainous areas at that time as readily as they were in the big cities and on the coastal areas. But
I think
the polio decline just as rapid as it did in the cities, because it's a virus. Like all viruses, it has a high point and a low point.
That isn't true. Polio is coming back in areas where people are no longer inoculating their children because they have forgotten the dread of the polio disease.
And,
that's
polio
absurd.
is also coming back into areas where people have been inoculated, and you know that.
That is not true. But my point is not polio. My point is when you use threats, intimidation, and violence to
Kathleen,
coerce
there are no threats.
people.
No threats have been ever done on our side. If anything, the threats have been done on the other side, and you know that.
Let me
there have
finish
never been threats. You keep making accusations. There's nothing to substantiate that.
Let me finish what I was saying.
Okay.
Let me say this. When you use these things to coerce people into believing what you believe, that is wrong. That is un-American. As far as using threats, one, women walking down the street wearing fur coats, when they get threatened to be spray painted or people spitting upon them, that is a threat. When there's a doctor in Texas who receives threats all the time, I receive death threats weekly, and they certainly aren't from my side.
Well, I receive them too, and they're not from my side either. As a matter of fact, I've even been shot, so it's not, these are not just threats, they've been carried out. So.
But weren't you shot by somebody, one of your own people?
Who works for the FBI, who's on as an informant for the FBI.
But my point is, you can believe what you want to believe, and you can preach it till the cows come home, and I don't care. But when you use,
Kathleen, can I ask you a question, please? Do you have any ties to the fur industry?
No.
You have no ties. Does your husband not work for Fur Age Weekly?
No.
He doesn't write for Fur Age Weekly? I have a whole bunch of articles right here I could show you that he does work for them.
We have a column from the trenches. That is not only in Fur Age Weekly, it's in 100 other publications across the country.
And you work for the
Fur Age Weekly.
And you have a silk business, correct?
No, I was a designer and fiber artist. I use silk, I use wool, cotton.
Who pays your salary to be doing what you're doing?
Nobody right now.
Right. And who do you think? What do you think I get out of all this?
What you get out of it is feeling that you are pressing your agenda, what you believe in.
And what is that? What is that? What do I believe in?
I believe that you believe in the animal rights movement. No human use of animals whatsoever.
And how about human exploitation? Seeing as how you know now that I have worked with children in orphanages, and I've been a big brother to a lot of kids.
Well,
and I also help a family in Kentucky that doesn't have enough money for medical. Any spare money I ever get, I send to this family.
I think that's wonderful. I think that's great. I just think that when you aid and abet terrorists, then you are guilty of terrorism.
Where's the terrorism, though, Kathleen? Terrorism,
in
people
ALF, Animal Liberation Front.
That take animals out of a laboratory that are being tortured.
And what do they do with them? They dump them on the side of the road to become roadkill.
Absolutely not true.
In Oregon, they dump the rabbits on the side of the road.
That's absolutely not true, because I could show you films and footage where all these animals have gone afterwards, after they've been liberated. Before they're ever taken out of a laboratory, they have been, they're already placed before they're taken out. I would not be a part of something where they're taking animals out and dumping them on a road, although they'd probably be better off on the road than they would in the laboratory. They would be. But, and not only that, you have made accusations that contagious animals have been taken out of these laboratories. That's absolutely not true. It's never been proven ever, because when the Animal Liberation Front takes an animal out of a laboratory, they check it carefully. They check the records of the researchers there to see what animals are contagious, and the ones that are not taken out. And that has never been proven. And as far as animals being dumped on the side of the road, you know this as well as I do, Kathleen. They would have, you guys would have footage of these animals and have them being held. It's never been done.
That's hog. But what I'm saying is, whatever you can cite, I can cite. We can sit here all day and cite incident after incident after incident. What I'm saying is the bottom line. The bottom line is you believe one thing, I believe another. I believe in this country, there's room for both beliefs as long as you believe it. Would you let me finish? I let you finish. I didn't interrupt you. When you can believe what you want to believe, and like I say, you can preach it all you want, but you can't cram it down our throats. That is wrong. That is wrong.
You're cramming it down my throat. You know what you're doing? You're trying to take my livelihood, my way of maybe making a living now, working on hard copy, by making all these accusations. You said, can I finish now?
Yes.
You said that all that's ever been on hard copy that you saw is these children, the Romanian orphans, that I was just trying to expose something again that I believe in very strongly about these children in orphanages in Romania and the horrible conditions. I brought that story to hard copy. Another one would be the children with muscular dystrophy in Texas. A whole family that has such a rough life. I wanted to show the courage and the love that was in that family. And then the only other story I did on hard copy had to do with people's pets being stolen. These people were victimized. Their animals are stolen and then sold to research. This is a national problem. It's going on all over the United States. All I tried to do is just make it people aware of it. That's all. And by the way, if we're talking about putting people first, how about the people that own the animals? They're people. They're being victimized. And all it's doing, it's helping them as well as the animals, if not more so, because they're really going through hell right now. You've seen on the show, you've seen people crying, children crying because their animals have been stolen. Well, I don't know where you get off at saying that I am one, a terrorist, two, that I hate children, and I'm feeding this hate-filled propaganda into the minds of the children in this country. That hurts. I mean, that's really offensive to me, seeing how I've always worked with children all my life, and I find no difference between the children now and with the animals. It's something that we have to look at life being equal. We do have to look at it, and until we find that day where we can look at all life as being equal, we're going to constantly have subjugation. We'll constantly have different people like Hussein and stuff like that who think that one group is less important than another.
Okay, we differ there. I believe, yes, we have to do a lot for the children. We have to take care of them. Children are extremely important, but they aren't equal to animals, or animals are not equal to children. Animals are not equal to children, and they can never be equal to children. We have to treat animals humanely, but we are part of nature. We're part of the food chain, and if you say no eating meat and no drinking milk and no animal use by humans whatsoever, you're putting animals above humans, because animals therefore then can eat other animals. They can even eat people if they can get a hold of them, but you're saying we can't. That is wrong as far as I'm concerned. And like I say, you can believe it all you want, you can live that way, and I say more power to you, but don't force it on us. And don't force the animal rights agenda on us. We don't want it, we don't believe in it, and it's unacceptable.
So it's wrong for me to force it, is that what you're saying? Then why are you forcing your beliefs on me and hard copy by trying to get me off hard copy? You deliberately said to get this terrorist, cultist, as you called me, off the hard copy set.
When we are told that you are going to be the producer for all animal issues, we feel that the public deserves to know exactly what your beliefs about animals and humans are.
Yes, and my belief is that trapping animals in horrible conditions is wrong. I do believe that you're right. And I do believe in raising animals just for fur, for someone's vanity. I do believe that is wrong, yes. And I do.
And how about eating meat?
I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat meat. I don't need it. And
how about
no
for
one
other
really needs it.
people?
other people make that choice once they become educated and they find out what it's doing to their health, as most doctors now say that it causes cancer, heart problems. Even physicians, medical doctors are telling you to stop eating meat or cut back on meat because it's bad for you. And I'm saying, let's try to educate the public so that they can make that choice themselves. There's no way I can force anybody to throw. All I keep trying to do is make the public aware and educate them as much as possible on that it's unhealthy for them, that the meat industry is also destroying the rainforest. And
that's hogwash.
I don't even have to, excuse me, I was still speaking. And that is also not hogwash because most people know that they're destroying the rainforest to raise cattle down there now. A cheap source of meat for McDonald's and things like that. So it's not hogwash. We're losing 100,000 acres a day of rainforest. So how can you say
not because of the beef industry.
Why then?
But what you're saying is you want to educate people to these things. You're not educating them. You are telling them one side of an issue, one side. And to educate, you give people two sides of an issue and you let them choose.
But Kathleen, they've always been getting one side of the issue. Always have been getting one side. Now it's time that we start giving our side of the issue. And just because we're speaking up, and we've been quiet for centuries, and we're speaking up, now we're terrorists, and now we're anti-human. I mean, anti-human nihilism. I mean, where do you come off saying that kind of stuff? That's nonsense, and you know that's nonsense.
Well, I think it's nonsense. I think it's nonsense for people to believe in it, but
to believe in what?
To believe in this anti-human thing that we have to do away with milk for babies.
Why do you say that's anti-human? What is anti-human about that?
Insulin for diabetics.
And again, we're just quoting doctors that's saying how insulin can...
And our doctors are all totally ridiculous and wrong.
No, wait.
You're quoting a book that has doctors in it.
Over 1,000 doctors. Are they all wrong, Kathleen?
And how many
are they all wrong?
How many doctors are in this country? How many doctors are in this country?
Thousands. Now, this is only, mind you, yes, this is only, there's little over 1,000 doctors in here.
A little over 1,000.
That's right. And you know what? They haven't gone to everybody. And you know it's changing more and more. And you know that's changing.
But how is it changing? I mean,
it's changing. It's changing
you have
because
animal rights people. You have animal rights people that are persecuting a researcher in Texas.
Oh, that's
there
nonsense. You speak about persecution. Wait a minute. You want to talk about a billboard? I have a videotape here, and I have photographs about from people on your side. I'm not saying putting people first. Here out in Riverside, saying that the enemy is upon our territory. The animal rights activists are here. The real enemy. I mean, how ludicrous. You know, it sounds like the John Bircher thing. It sounds like this ultra right-wing McCarthyism that's coming about again.
Chris, let me ask you a question.
I don't know.
Let me interject a question here to see about how strongly your beliefs are held.
I can't hear.
You know, Kathleen, also in People's Agenda, it said on May 1991, it says 73%, and these are your quotes, 73% of the American public believe that medical researchers torture their research animals. Another quote, 57% of the public believes that we activists have done more good than harm. And what you say in your newsletters is that we better start mobilizing, meaning you people, start mobilizing to counteract what the animal rights activists are trying to do.
That's right, because researchers do not torture their animals. Maybe less than a percentage of them do, like in the general public, but researchers, people don't go into research so that they can torture animals.
Whether it's done deliberately or not,
would you
Kathleen,
let me finish?
But Kathleen, when it's done, the animals aren't being tortured.
I let you finish. Please let me finish. A researcher does not spend that many years in school just so that he can torture animals. If he wanted to torture animals, he could go out and find cats and dogs all over the place. There's enough of them. You don't go into research to torture animals, and researchers do not torture animals. It's just that the animal rights lie out there has been convincing people that researchers torture their animals, and that's why I quoted that statistic that 73% of the public believe the lie that researchers torture their animals.
And what about the 57% of the public that believes that we activists have done more good than harm?
Well, they need to be educated on what you've really done, don't they?
That's right, and once they become educated, that percentage is going to be a lot higher, Kathleen, a lot higher. Because the more they learn about what's going on inside these facilities, even no matter who you are, you start to see that this kind of torture, I'm not saying it's deliberate torture, I never said that. This type of torture going on inside these facilities to these animals, and it is a torture, and if you've ever been inside these facilities, you know it is. And when the public starts to see what's going on inside there, there's no way they could say that this is helping human beings. If anything, that data is detrimental to human health. It does not carry over to human beings.
I think that when the public starts seeing the results of the animal rights movement, the high cost of research because researchers have to worry about security and everything, and when the cures stop coming in, I think, yes, the public will see what's going on, and I think they will decide. And I think that they will come down on the side of humanity.
Do you know, also, you talk about us not having our facts and things like that. What about putting people first? You made comments about Congressman George Brown, and I've got it right here, quotes from Congressman Brown saying that these people, that putting people first made errors which are so basic in nature that I must question the credibility of the group involved.
Yes,
now that's coming from Congressman Brown.
Right, we made a typo and said Charlie Rose was from Georgia instead of North Carolina.
Yes.
That was our inconsistency, and
I
do apologize because everybody does know that Charlie Rose is from North Carolina.
And I do have the full article, and there are many other inconsistencies within it.
Well, I would say that his comments were politically induced, however you want to put it, and what we said stands on its own.
I go back to the one thing. You make these attacks on me. And also you say something about the T-shirts, a skunk, save a skunk, roadkill an activist. I'd like to know, are you soliciting the murder of activists? I mean, you say this is in jest, but in jest, children see this stuff. And you're talking about distorting the minds and of the children in this country. They see this. You know how impressionistic children are.
Come on. Don't give me that garbage. For one thing,
what
if you
garbage?
Don't have a sense of humor, that's ridiculous. If you look at
sense
Saturday
of humor
morning
to kill somebody? I don't call that a sense of humor. You're right.
I don't go around promoting killing people. If you look at Saturday morning cartoons and you see the cartoons that show evil medical researchers and kids going in with cameras to film what these horrible doctors are doing. Now that is what I think that I have to worry about, and the general public has to worry about.
You know, I'm sorry. You know, you have another quote from and you're from the trenches. You attack animal rights cultists for condemning Brazilians for farming the rainforest, Koreans for eating dogs, Africans for hunting game, and Chinese for buying ivory and tortoise shells. Let me ask you this question, Kathleen. Do you encourage people to support the destruction of the Brazilian rainforest, the distinction of the elephants from the ivory trade as well as tortoises, and the consumption of pet dogs by Asians?
No, and
But that's what you said in your article.
No, wait a minute. Would you, this is interesting. I was invited here for a debate, but I don't think that a one-on-one with you questioning me is a debate. I think this is a real setup, and I think it stinks. I will sit here, but I don't think that you have the right to ask all the questions, and I have to sit here and defend myself. I think, I was brought here under false pretenses, and I was told there was going to be somebody that was going to be asking the questions, and you and I were going to get to be answering them, not that you got to ask all the questions, and I had to sit here on the hot seat, so to speak. And as far as Koreans eating dogs, I think it's fascinating that an animal rights group would do a major mailing in this country about Korean picnics with a picture of a dog hanging from a tree and the family beating on it to tenderize it before they cook it, and they raise all this money. All I want to know is, did the money go to Korea to stop Korean picnics? Because obviously they don't happen in this country. Where did that money go?
Kathleen, let me interject here, ask you about your concern about this being a setup. I promise we didn't give Chris a bigger mic than you. If you have questions you want to throw at him, now's the chance.
Well, I came here being told that it was a debate, that somebody was going to be asking questions. Well, if it's Chris DeRose asking questions, that isn't the way I was told it was going to be.
Jump in, ask Chris a question.
Well, I wasn't planning. I came expecting Chris to have to answer the same kind of questions that I had to answer. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I'll ask Chris a question for you. Chris, you've been quoted as saying, a life is a life. If the death of one rat cured all the diseases in the world, it wouldn't make any difference to me. In the scheme of life, we're equal. You believe that?
That's right. And I stand on that argument on a moral and ethical basis. Realistically, however, we know that one rat couldn't cure all the diseases. As a matter of fact, all the rats in the world couldn't cure the diseases.
Does that not seem extreme to you? To say if one rat would save all the children suffering from dysentery in perpetuity, you wouldn't sacrifice that one rat.
Again, Barry, that was a moral and ethical thing. Because in the scheme of life, we are all equal, in the scheme of life. What I'd like to see are the cures to these diseases. And I, for one, if I could give my life, and I say this to you, Kathleen, if you would do the same thing, and I'm sure you would. If I could give my life to save to find a cure for all these diseases, I would do it. I wouldn't hesitate about it.
Does that not seem extreme to you? Can you understand how the average person thinks that is extreme? No, the rat thing. To not sacrifice a rat, a slug, a sea worm, to save children. That is going to strike people as very extreme.
But that's the point, though, Barry, is that it is detrimental to human health. The data coming from rats to humans is not helping human beings. That's the whole point. It's a big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry that's been set up by the Pharmaceutical and the American Medical Association, and it's nothing but a scam. And people are now getting hep to it because they keep promising, like Jerry Lewis Telethon, for example, promises us the cure year in and year out, another $1 million we need. And he brings out the poor children. And we have children from the poster children from Muscular Dystrophy Association who are coming out now and speaking against it. And I have articles on some of them here. I mean, there are people that are speaking out now, finally.
Kathleen, let me ask how extreme your organization, to what extremes your organization goes. Is there any question that there has been experimentation or animal use that is really inappropriate? I mean, can we just say up front, you don't need to spray oven cleaner in a rabbit's eye. Let's just accept that it's going to be bad for you if you spray it in your eye.
I believe that that is true, and that testing is not done. What I was told as far as the DeRose test, if they know it's caustic, they know it's going to be an irritant, they don't put it in the rabbit's eye. That it's just, it happened 30 years ago that they used to do that, but they don't do that now. And as far as Mr. DeRose saying that he feels equal to a rat.
Kathleen, that's not true about the test. They're still doing tests on products and cosmetics that they've been doing for 30 years. They're still putting ammonia and lye and oven cleaner and things like that in rabbits' eyes. They're still doing it. We have footage on it. That's not 30 years old. It's recent.
How old
is it? They're still doing it. Don't you know that?
No, I do not know that.
Well, this is why.
But the point is not.
I was talking now.
Wait. Well, you're talking about 3/4 of the time. The point is that it's very hard to relate to someone who feels equal to a rat. I'm sorry, it's just...
So you'll keep going back to that because on moral and ethical basis, and I'll explain it to you again so maybe you won't have to waste your time on trying to use that quote. And it's a quote I'll stand behind because morally and ethically, we are equal. And I say a life is a life.
Morally and ethically, we're equal to rats.
Morally and ethically, I feel right. A life is a life. Listen, to the mother rat of a baby rat, I'm sure the baby rat's more important than my cousins or my sister or something. So it depends on whose perspective you're looking at, Kathleen.
Yes, but
now you keep going back to the rat. The reason you go back to the rat, Kathleen, is because it's something that you're trying to make where it makes me look silly or something. But as I said to you, it's a moral and ethical issue there. But however, scientifically, it's detrimental. It's hurting people because you can never hear me. You'll never hear me say I believe a rat is more important than a human being. That's not the case. That is not the case. So get that out of your head.
But you just said that morally and ethically, these lives are equal.
Equal, not more important. It's just it's just like there are people. Equal. There have been people who believe that white people are superior to black people, and it's been going on and on and on. This whole thing of superiority, whether it be racism or speciesism, it's got to come to an end at some point. It has to come to an end.
No, because racism is between two parts of the same species. Rats, mice, dogs, apes do not have the ability to reason. They do not have the ability to morally know what is right or wrong and therefore choose to do.
Who's this?
Rats,
Well,
mice,
but so
apes.
the retarded children. They don't have. They don't know.
Chris,
reason.
let Kathleen have her moment here. Go ahead, Kathleen.
They do not have the ability to morally know right from wrong and therefore choose to do right from wrong. These animals also, I mean, you cannot say these lives are equal. Human beings have something special, something that you cannot define, that makes them, they have this brain that is wonderful, and not only can it choose right from wrong and therefore do moral things, we can choose to take care of animals. As far as they're concerned, animals, if they want to eat us and they have a chance, they will. Animals are strictly amoral. They cannot choose. They act on reason.
But I must respond. I must respond to that, though.
We have a brain that not only can design a sewing machine, we can send a man to the moon. Animals never will be able to do this.
Without the brain, I agree, Kathleen.
Humans are superior to animals.
You're right.
Kathleen,
I agree. I must
like
answer this. Excuse me, Barry. I must comment on this. I agree with you. Without that brain, we would not have had all the wonderful things in history that we've had. We would not have had Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Treblinka, Buchenwald, the Spanish Inquisition, slavery. You're right. Without the brain, we would not have had all these wonderful things. And going back to that, if you're talking about a rat cannot make these decisions, how about a child or that's handicapped, mentally retarded? Well, how about someone that was in a motorcycle accident and has brain injury? How about people like this that cannot make those decisions for themselves? We have to be responsible for that, am I right?
Yeah, you cannot use the exception to prove a rule. And you mentioned Buchenwald. You have to remember, Hitler was an anti-vivisectionist and a vegetarian. And so, I mean, if you want to know what caused that kind of stuff, look. I've just lost my hearing.
Let me ask you, Kathleen, why, if Chris is doing a, can you hear me?
Just a sec.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
I got it.
If Chris, you all set?
Yes.
If Chris is doing stories about Romanian orphans, what do you object to if he's doing those kind of stories, and who has been writing those letters about it?
Who is writing the letters?
Your group has encouraged people to write letters, is that correct?
Our group encouraged, I know IFAR, Incurably Ill for Animal Research, encouraged people to write letters. It's when someone like Chris DeRose, like Bob Barker, like Ingrid Newkirk, who everybody knows if they see them, oh, Bob Barker, he means animal rights. Chris DeRose, Wayne Pacelli, Cleveland Amory. Whatever you say is people, wherever you go, people see you as representing this movement.
The animal rights movement you're talking about.
The animal rights movement. And if someone is doing programs and people are using them as an example, then children are looking up to them saying, oh, he's wonderful. And he may be wonderful doing stories on refugees in foreign countries or people with diseases, but the children don't know how to draw the line and say, but he has beliefs that maybe my parents don't believe in, or maybe aren't quite what I should believe in. They think he's great and he says this, so I should do it.
So what if Chris has a political belief that you find objectionable, so you don't want him on the show? What if he had a religious belief that you found objectionable? Same thing, different?
He has a religious belief. I believe that the animal rights movement is he's talking about it being moral.
Moral issues are one of the fundamental things you talk about in religion. Suppose he said this was his religion. Suppose he said he's an animist and prays to animals. Is this a right that he still has to be on a show like this? Does Bob Barker lose his right to do The Price is Right because he has the anti-fur religion?
I don't know about Bob Barker having the right to do anything, and obviously Chris DeRose has the right to get any job he wants, but we have the right to say that we don't want these people that are pushing this agenda to be on a program. And the animal rights movement uses boycott. We have the right to do this. This is a grassroots American thing.
That's right. And Kathleen, I must tell you that if you knew me and you knew my friends and people around me, I don't push anything. I don't push vegetarianism on them. I don't push. If somebody asks me a question, I answer the question. I don't keep going on about it. I don't push anything. What I try to do is maybe set an example. It seems like putting people first in other groups are afraid that if we do show a good example to children and other people in this country, that they may be out of their jobs, the jobs that are keeping them in with a lot of money. And you know that there's a lot of money in the biomedical research community, the fur industry, not as much now in the fur industry as it was, but there's a lot of money involved in this, and these are people, and most of the people who wrote in are people, almost all the people who wrote in have to do with this industry, one of these industries.
Oh, that's not true. But
it's true. I have the letters right.
As far as setting an example, I think going to jail is not setting an example for what I would want my children to ever be proud of.
Martin Luther King went to jail. Gandhi went to jail. Thoreau went to jail. I say yes, I would follow their footsteps anytime. It's the reason you go to jail, not what you're going to, it's the reason you're going to jail. And I think the reasons that we were going to jail, and we modeled everything after these three great people.
The reason that you went to jail is because you broke the law.
Trespassing, but emphasize that it was misdemeanor trespassing, which
it
in my
was
first
breaking
offense,
the law. It was
but my
breaking the
first
law.
offense, by the way, I got 45 days, and they put me in solitary confinement. It's a very political thing because, as you know, your side has a lot of power and a lot of clout. But that's changing again.
Chris, where do you get your money from? Where do you get your political support from? Characterize it.
Our group gets money from donations, just from individuals. It's very seldom ever over $100 donation.
Kathleen, where do you get your funding from? Who gives to your organization? What kind of people belong?
Individuals, all people from all walks of life.
Organizations? Chris believes that you get significant money from the fur industry. Is that true?
Well, I wish we did. I wish they'd fork some over, but no, we don't. We have a lot of furriers who are members, but at $15 a year membership, that isn't a whole lot of money, no matter how you look at it.
Chris?
Well, I don't know where Kathleen gets her funding from. I have no idea. It's just like, and I'll admit that. Whereas Kathleen and other people, they make accusations that we get our money here, we do this, we do that, and which is absolutely not true.
What did I accuse you?
When I said Kathleen, people like you, I've heard other people saying that we have big donors and wealthy people supporting and backing us, which is the most nonsensical thing there is. So
that makes me feel good.
Yeah, well, good. See, we're on the same ground there.
Do we have any common ground here? Are there any statements that Chris makes that you can find support for, Kathleen, that perhaps we should more closely examine some of our animal research, and certainly some of it can be eliminated by more effective computer models? Chris, can you understand? Go ahead, Kathleen first.
I was going to say, I think that that is already going on in the research community, because using animals is very expensive and they're not going to do it if they don't have to. The research, everybody talks about it being big business. I know a number of researchers, and they're not wealthy people. They're definitely middle class. So wherever this money is going, it isn't going to researchers as Chris and his animal rights movement would like people to believe.
Chris, can you find some common ground with Kathleen's organization? Do you believe that everybody out there is a Freddy Krueger waiting for the next dog to walk in? Or?
No. As I said before, I don't believe that people in the research community are doing it on a vindictive or satanic type basis. So I believe a lot of them are looking for it, but they've been conditioned all through school, college and everything to feel that they're going to find a cure to something. And they've been desensitized as well, that the animals don't feel pain and things like that. However, just talking to Kathleen, I think that I'd like someday, Kathleen, maybe to sit down and talk with you personally, and maybe really see where there is a common ground, because I think somewhere there is, and I feel that maybe if you have come in contact with any of these animals in fur traps, for example, I know that's the closest thing to you is the fur industry, for one reason or another. I would like to sit down with you sometime and talk to you, or go visit some of these animals and just sit down and just see, look into their eyes, and then tell me that you don't mind seeing them die and get killed. Because I know that you say you hunt and everything, and you say you hunt and this and that, and then you say you like animals at the same time. And I see the contradictions there. And that's the problem here. There are a lot of contradictions. I mean, you know, looking at you, at your pictures and stuff, and then speaking to you, you sound like a very kind lady, a very sweet lady. And I just don't know where this thing is about wanting to keep propagating killing in animals that just for our own personal whims. I don't understand it. I think someday, I hope someday that maybe in your own conscience, maybe you'll see where it's got to be changed.
Kathleen, the final comment. Is Chris right? Are you a very kind lady?
I'm kind. I'm not connected to the fur industry.
And a final comment summing up how you and your folks feel.
We feel that it's very important to treat animals humanely, but we are part of nature. We're part of the food chain, and we don't want other people's morals forced down our throats.
Kathleen, do you still feel Chris shouldn't be on hard copy, and do you still feel like you were set up?
Yes, but it's fine.
Right. Yes, which? All right, let me ask him separately. Do you feel like you were set up?
Somewhat, yes.
And do you still feel Chris should not be on hard copy?
Yes, I do. But I'd like to meet him. Like he said, he'd like to sit down with me. I'd like to sit down with him.
Chris, what can you say to Kathleen in parting?
Well, I know what you mean by feeling like you're set up. I kind of feel like I'm set up sitting here, too. It's tough. And, you know, you have a certain amount of time to get your points across, and that's what I'm trying to do. And if I sometimes cut you off, you know, I apologize about that. But it is, there are so many, as you know, so many issues that have to be covered and so little time to do it. So if I felt like you were repeating yourself, I jumped in. I was kind of expecting you pretty much to do the same. Having done many debates, it's pretty much gone that way.
Right.
I haven't done any.
You just improved your mark for works and plays well with other, Chris, so that was nice. Thank you both for joining us. Both deeply felt and diametrically opposing beliefs, but you can see that both sides are quite sincere, and thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank
Thanks
you.
And goodbye.